spinach at lunchtime and maybe more exercise.
Lasers are cool.
When it comes to creating healthier communities, what this place needs is you. To donate or volunteer, go to UnitedWay.org. Because great things happen when we live united. Brought to you by United Way, the Ad Council.
This is WGBB AM 1240 and W240 TFFM 95.9 Freeport, New York.
The views expressed in the following program do not necessarily represent those of the staff, management, or owners of WGBB. Live from Merrick, New York, this is Sportstalk 1240.
And that's right, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another edition of Sports Talk 1240. I'm your host, Rob Cramer, and it is February 9th, 2020. And can you believe we're already past the Super Bowl right now? And we're in that bit of the calendar right now where things are supposed to be settling down. We're supposed to be having a couple of weeks of not much sports excitement going on. The Super Bowl 54 is now a week old as we crown new champions, the Chiefs, for the first time in 50 years. They took the crown last week as Pat Mahomes led the Chiefs 31-20 over the 49ers, so we got that in the rearview mirror. But this year is unlike many in the past, where this year we got a lot of things going on. The NBA trade deadline just passed as the Knicks made a big trade, sending Marcus Morris out to LA to play with the Clippers. And they got back a bunch of assets in that deal, which we'll get into a little bit later. We had the rebirth of the XFL this weekend. And a league that came out in 2001, only lasted for that one season. Remembered mostly for the bad parts of it, a lot more so than good football at least. Although a lot of people like myself remember Tommy Maddox, who would win the XFL MVP that season and get a shot in the NFL a year or two later, playing with the Steelers, among other teams. But we'll get into the XFL a little bit as well. But so many things also. Spring training is right around the corner. The Mets and the Yankees both are going to be getting into camp, pitchers and catchers reporting in the next week or so. We also get to kill the Mets again on this show because, once again, they just, continue to be the Mets. And the WIlpons sale, supposedly to Steve Cohen, the $13 billion man who's going to be purchasing the Mets, that deal fell through. Many people, including myself, fans, and media personalities, are pointing the fingers at the WIlpons. Major League Baseball and the WIlpons are pointing their fingers at Stevie Cohen. So, they're talking about blackballing this guy from the league, not ever allowing him to purchase another team again. So, I guess things got a little sour on that end. Stevie Cohen sending out a couple of, tongue-in-cheek remarks about how well Major League Baseball and the WIlpons treated him this week, too. So, we'll see how things pan out there. It looks like the Mets are going up to auction. So the one thing Met fans can hang your hat on is that hopefully at some point in the next couple of years, it might take a little bit longer than we'd like, but at some point, the WIlpons will not be the majority owners of this team anymore. And I know every Met fan will be throwing a party about that. So we'll get into that in a little bit as well as, like I said, a bunch of things to get into. And let's start off with the XFL, actually. Why not? A week after Super Bowl 54 finished up, and like I said, we crowned the Chiefs as the Super Bowl champions. Everybody was thinking that football's over, and, now what are we going to do? You have the football, people go into that withdrawal of not having some kind of football, not even college football or anything like that to sink your teeth in. We haven't had the Arena League for a couple of years as that went under. A lot of people like the Arena League, myself included. When I was younger, me and my cousins would always be heading out to the to Nassau Coliseum to catch some arena games. Without that now, there's that little bit of gap, but to fill that gap, to fill that void in your life, is the XFL. And the XFL showed back up this weekend with their first game being the DC Defenders, who are the overwhelming favorites. I don't really know how they came up with these, but Cardale Jones, former standout quarterback from Ohio State, was their quarterback, going up against the Seattle Dragons, and that was supposed to be a blowout. It was a very close game in the first half, but the Dragons ended up falling apart late in that game as DC took that 31-19. Also this weekend, we had the Houston Roughnecks. Now, you got to get used to these names. I know a lot of these names might be abrasive to the ear the first time you hear them, but just give it a chance. And you never know if these teams could be moving around. We'll see what exactly happens with this league. But the Houston Roughnecks took it to the LA Wildcats, at least 37-17. That wasn't really a close game at all. Another game that wasn't really that close was the Guardians game today. The first game at at Giant Stadium, at the Meadowlands, whatever you want to call it now, the MetLife Stadium. It's the first game in 2020 there, so you can hang your hat on that. As the New York Guardians did something that both of these New York teams really didn't do too much this year. Win 23-3. They really took it to the Tampa Bay Vipers, who were favored coming in this game. A lot of people thought Tampa Bay was going to be pretty good. The offense just never got it done. Kept getting downfield, but bad turnovers, missed field goals, and choking away opportunities cost this team big time. A 23-3 win right there for New York. And then the final game on the card was the 5 o'clock game today, as the St. Louis Battlehawks took down the Dallas Renegades 15-9. So, not a lot of household names, coming away from this weekend. There's a couple of guys like Kevin Gilbride, who was the coach, for the New York Guardians. Jim Zorn, former NFL quarterback, was a coach for Seattle. So they had a lot of familiar faces, not on the sidelines calling the games. I saw Kevin Burkhardt was calling the New York game today. So you have to hand it to the XFL for giving a very professional broadcast. It looked like a football game. It felt like a football game. Back in 2001, I can't say that it was that. It felt like, on some broadcasts, it felt like Monday Night Raw, where you'd turn in, you'd see these guys fighting for a ball to start the thing off. You'd hear Jerry the King Lawler and good old JR calling the action, and you'd be saying to yourself, is this a football game or a Las Vegas show? And a lot of the times it was the latter. So we ended up seeing some good football today, good announcing, guys that really took their time and studied these rosters and picked out certain stories to tell. There was a lot of good play. There was a lot of good feelings too, just seeing a lot of these guys get a second chance, because in this country we haven't had, we're the only country that really promotes this kind of football. So and there really aren't many players coming from other countries, and there isn't a minor league system that we have. So I think that another league like this that gives guys an opportunity is not a bad thing, and it gets guys in a spotlight again. I saw the Jets and the Giants had about 4 or 5 combined scouts at the game today, specifically the one at MetLife. So it gets these guys in the forefront, and that's not a bad thing. It puts these guys in a good light, and there have been so many other attempts from leagues. Obviously, in the '80s, it was before my time, but the USFL was big back then. Everybody, Herschel Walker and all these guys came from that, from that group over there. The other big thing that's been around for a while is the CFL, the Canadian Football League. We've had other attempts like the UFL, NFL Europe. There have been so many attempts to kind of try and create a pipeline outside of just college that these guys can have for professional football, and having something like this is at least a jumping off point. It's a way to get people to get used to the idea of football for, more than just the accustomed 21 weeks or so that we're used to. Whether because take the, I guess you could really get it up to 25, 26 weeks if you want to include training camp and all the other things that go along with it. But really, if you're talking about football from the first to the second week in September through the first weekend in February, that's what people have grown accustomed to enjoying their football as. That's the end. But believe me, especially when you see today, at the DC Defenders played in the DC MLS stadium, the soccer stadium down there, and they packed it out. It looked really great on camera. Today in MetLife, they didn't. Obviously it's an 80,000 seat football stadium, so it's kind of tough to gauge the reaction today. But if you look, they had about 20,000 very passionate fans there today, and for the first game where nobody was expecting much from this, I mean, a lot of people looked at it as a joke and just laughed at it. They got 20,000 people there today, and there was a lot of enthusiasm. It was good to see. So, the good first weekend for the XFL. They'll start it back up next weekend. As I like the fact that they have a 2:00 game and a 5:00 game on both Saturday and Sunday. You're not getting bogged down with 8 hours of football. You're not getting just completely overswamped with 3-4 games. It's just one game and I have to say they've been running at a pretty good pace too. 2.5, a little bit more, 2.5 hours, a little bit more than that. So they've been pretty good. And I bet right now that many people didn't think that I'd spend the first 10 minutes of this show breaking down the first XFL weekend. So, I probably wouldn't have thought that a week ago either, but it impressed me. So, well done, XFL. And all those guys should be proud of themselves. And hopefully they get through this season with, very little problems, and that it lasts longer than its previous incarnation. And we get at least a second season of the XFL. So we'll see how that goes. Now moving on, I want to touch on the Knicks, as we just saw the Knicks drop a overtime decision tonight, 135-40. That's a game the Knicks, to be honest, should not have lost. I mean, give me a break. The Knicks losing that game is a joke. But what are you going to do? I mean, I'm not going to sit here and lament a loss for this team that's 20 games under 500. But this is a game they should have won. It would have been their 5th in a row. It would have been a nice feel to it. But, and one thing else too, if you're going to sit here and you're going to play all these veterans, and you're going to be playing Reggie Bullock, and you're going to be playing Elfrid Payton, and you're going to be playing all these guys who don't have a future on this team, to be honest, then I want to see wins. I don't want to see these type of losses where if you were playing Kevin Knox 25, 30 minutes, if you were playing Neil Aquina that type of minutes, if you were, giving, all of these guys that kind of time, you can take a loss like this and say, okay, at least these guys played well and had a good game. But in a loss like that, it's just annoying. Would have been a 5-game winning streak, and it would have been more symbolic than anything. But I think it shows this guy Mike Miller is getting a lot out of this team. He's 13-19 now since he took over from Fizdale, who started this season at 4-18. So I'd say that they're playing a little bit more from Mike Miller. I don't want to dump all over David Fizdale either. I don't think Fizdale's a bad coach. I just think it was a bad situation. I don't know if David Fizdale's coaching style meshes with a young and unproven group as much as I thought, and maybe the Knicks thought, and maybe even he thought it would. He seems like more of a vet guy to me after having watched it. But I guess you could say the same thing about Mike Miller. He's playing a lot of these vets too, but he's getting more out of the team as a collective. So I guess take that for what you will. But just to get to the big things with the Knicks, because as sad as that is to say, wins and losses haven't meant anything for the Knicks in quite some time because, frankly, they haven't been getting enough wins to matter. But so last week the Knicks made headlines when they fired Steve Mills just days before the trade deadline. They supposedly the reasoning for this Steve Mills fire was because Steve Mills wanted to go out and acquire things other than first round picks and future assets like that. Maybe he wanted to go out and keep a Marcus Morris, but maybe even go out and flip some things to acquire a D'Angelo Russell, like was rumored before that. And I don't think Knicks management, specifically Jim Dolan, liked that plan, and that's why we saw the departure of Mills. We're probably going to see the departure of Steve Perry in the next couple of days because the rumored person who the media have pretty much just named this guy the heir to the presidential throne, if you will, at the Garden, at the Mecca, if you want to still call it that, Leon Rose, a former agent, who, a lot of people are hoping that maybe he has the correct relationships with a bunch of players that maybe can get guys over here, but, the Knicks have apparently been hiring guys for years because of their relationship with players. See David Fizdale, see Phil Jackson, and we see how well both those have worked out. So I hope that they're hiring him for the right reasons. If they're not, they're going to pay the piper like they always have and take it on the chin. But, this guy Leon Rose, I'm willing to give him a chance. I've heard nothing but good things about him from people around the league. Seems like hiring agents are becoming the trend in sports right now to be the GM. These guys do have an inside knowledge of how contracts and negotiations and things like that work, so it kind of makes sense if you look at it in that perspective. I think this guy Leon Rose has every chance to succeed. I mean, just look at the Warriors. Although I think the Warriors were kind of a made team by the time this guy stepped in. But hey, wins are wins. So this guy's got a lot of them, and you can't discount that. Also, you got to look at Brody Van Wagenen and say what you want. I mean, look, say what you want about Brody. The Mets have been floundering for 2 years, and under his watch, as bad as that Cano-Diaz trade might have been, Mets actually won 86 games last year, so it's not the worst thing in the world. I guess he's really going to be judged a lot on this season too, but so far, it's not like that this Brody Van Wagenen experiment has been this awful disaster. Well, like it's been painted by a lot of people too, so it really hasn't. It might not have worked out to every Met fan's, dreams and thoughts of when he was first appointed. It might not have been that yet, but it's also not the worst thing in the world. But to be fair, with all the young guys he's traded and all the moves that he's made, only time will tell how Brody Van Wagenen has done. I mean, you could look 10 years from now and look at all the young guys he dealt and say, hey, he pretty much didn't get rid of anybody, which Omar Minaya was killed in the 2000s for just giving away young prospects. And in retrospect, when you go back and look, he really didn't give up anything. I mean, people talked for years about how much the Mets gave up in the Johan Santana trade, and the only guy that really panned out in that deal was Carlos Gomez, who's had a good career, and Philip Umber threw a no-hitter, or it might have even been a perfect game, to be honest. But that was his only major league moment. He was a subpar major league pitcher outside of that one start. So, a couple of the other guys in the deal didn't even pan out. So, if you look at that, and it's kind of like a president where a lot of the times you can't tell how good a president was until at least a decade or a couple of administrations have passed. It's the same thing with these GMs where their moves are going to be judged by time and how well a lot of these players pan out. But to keep looking at the Knicks for a second as we take a look right now, it looks like Leon Rose, should he not keep Scott Perry around, which a lot of people aren't sure of yet. They very well could keep Scott Perry. I don't know. It could even be in a different role. They might just reassign him. Um, the people that are on the short list to replace him, should he go though, are Bobby Marks, Chris Wallace, and John Calipari. Personally, I think I'd rather Calipari coach the team, but when you look at these candidates, you got to say there's probably a few names out there that we don't know yet, but it's a good little list. I think that this guy Leon Rose could be having the Knicks on the right track, because if you look at the Knicks too, they have a lot of assets right now. They got 7 first-round picks in the next 3 years, or 4, whatever it is, 3 or 4 years. They've got a lot of first-round picks coming their way, and 4 at least the next 2 years. They got 2 this year, the one they got from the Clippers, and we'll go over the compensation they got from Marcus Morris in a minute. But they've got the Clippers' first-round pick this year and their own. They've got Dallas's first-round pick and their own next year. Then the year after that, 2023, they have their and Dallas's first-round pick again. So that's a lot of assets, and the Knicks don't have many contract, that they don't have many contracts that are guaranteed beyond this season. So they don't have too many commitments on that salary cap. And one thing that's good in the NBA that you can do is you can use your salary cap room as a weapon. You can trade a first-round pick, or you can trade a player of lesser value for a good player if that team is in salary cap trouble and just needs to get rid of a guy. So they attach a good piece to him. And that's something that happens in the NBA a lot. That's part of the reason the Knicks acquired former St. John's player Mo Harkless in this trade to offset that salary and everything like that. But so let's go over that trade actually. As we get into it, this Marcus Morris trade, the Knicks got back former St. John's player Mo Harkless, like I just said, that first-round pick that I mentioned before from this year. They also got the right to swap the Clippers' first-round pick next year. It's top 4 protected, but I think that's just kind of the Knicks trying to save face, because the Knicks most likely are going to have a better pick than the Clippers next year, so it probably won't even come to play. But the one thing that I do wonder is, since the Knicks own Dallas's pick next year, and that's their pick, I wonder if that applies to that pick too, and maybe they could swap that. But I guess that'll all be spilled out in the next year, so they have a lot of time to figure that out. They also acquired Detroit's, because the Clippers own Detroit's second-round pick, so they own Detroit's second-round pick next year as well. And the Clippers got Marcus Morris from the Knicks. This was a 3-team trade that included the Wizards. So the Wizards sent Isaiah Thomas to the Clippers, and the Wizards got Jerome Robinson. So it was kind of a confusing trade. A lot of moving pieces, a lot of things. There are a lot of quantifiers there. There are a lot of when you look at Mo Harkless, there's a guy that probably doesn't have a spot in the Knicks. He's only on a 1-year deal, so he's going to be gone soon. And when you look at this team, that's one of the things that they had to do. They had to go out and acquire assets. Oh, and actually, as a matter of fact, the Knicks even got one other thing in this trade. It was the rights to a European player who hasn't even made the crossover from Europe to the States. His name is Isaf Sanan. I hope I pronounced that right. I probably didn't, so my apologies after I butchered his name. But he's a European prospect, so things like that. It's always good to have that in your back pocket. You'd rather have that than not have that. So it's another asset. That's all the Knicks can ask for. And maybe it's another piece that they use to strengthen their team down the line. Whether he comes in and he actually plays, or the possibility of him being used as a sweetener in another trade that brings a big piece here, whether it be a star or something along those lines. So we'll see what that is. We'll see how that goes. and that's a good trade by the Knicks. It's something they need to do. I wish that they had included, I really wish they had included like an Alfred Payton, or I like Bobby Portis. I really do. I'm a big Bobby Portis fan. I wouldn't have mind seeing him get traded. But a lot of these guys that are vets on 1-year contracts, Reggie Bullock, guys along those lines, who had a good game tonight, and I like Reggie Bullock. He's added a bit of professionalism to that backcourt, and that's something that's needed too, especially with these young kids there. But I don't know, Reggie. It doesn't have a spot on this team, and all all the minutes these guys are playing are just taking away minutes from kids that the Knicks have to develop and get these kids going. So that's the main thing that I'd be thinking about with that. But all right, and so as we wind down here for the first half of this show, ladies and gentlemen, I want to thank you for sticking around here with me on Sunday night. I want to remind you too. Actually, I forgot to say this in the beginning of the show, but if you want to check us out on sportstalk1240.com. You can check out all of our old shows, all the hosts, anything else you want to know, who's going to be hosting next week, and when any of your favorites are about to host. You can check that out. Check us out on Twitter at sportstalk1240. On Facebook, give us a like, sportstalk1240, and you can follow me on Twitter as well at Cramer, my last name Cramerny. So thanks for sticking around with me on this Sunday night here, and we'll be taking our first break, and I'll catch you back in a minute here. Thanks for tuning in.
You're listening to Sportstalk 1240 on Long Island's AM 1240. WGBB. Country Foot Care, official podiatrists of the New York Lizards, have been delivering state-of-the-art foot care with good old-fashioned caring to Long Island residents for over 30 years. Specialists in sports medicine and foot injuries, Country Foot Care can be reached at 516-741-FEET or online at countryfootcare.com. Want to advertise your business on Sportstalk 1240? Place an ad on sportstalk1240.com and run a radio commercial during the show every Sunday night here on AM 1240 WGBB. Our rates are very affordable. We'll even produce the radio commercial for you. Just head over to sportstalk1240.com and fill out the Contact Us form. And let us start promoting your business today. Unflippable, unflappable, unleakable. The Dustbuster is the only umbrella that won't flip inside out, rip, tear, or leak. Capable of withstanding winds over 55 miles per hour. All of our umbrellas are constructed of the finest quality materials and backed by a limited lifetime guarantee. What are you waiting for? Visit dustbuster.com and get your Dustbuster today. Stay connected to Sportstalk 1240 by following us on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram at Sportstalk 1240.
You're listening to Sportstalk 1240, broadcasting every Sunday night beginning at 8 p.m. right here on Long Island's AM 1240 WGBB, the station that serves your community. And now back to the show.
All right, and we're back here on Sports Talk 1240. I'm your host, Rob Cramer, and this is This Day in Sports History. This day in sports history, on February 9th, 1920, the Joint Rules Committee banned foreign substances and alterations to baseball, effectively outlawing the spitball among other common practices and pitches in the early 20th century, dramatically affecting the game. On February 9th, 1951, the St. Louis Browns, who would become the future Orioles, signed pitcher Satchel Paige at the age of 45, his second stint in the majors. He'd have his best major league season at this age, going 12-10 with a 3.07 ERA. Oddly enough, he was also elected to the Hall of Fame on this date in 1971. This date in 1960, the AFL and the NFL agreed to a no-tampering pact, which pretty much neither of them honored. On this date in 1980, Rick Barry hit 8 3-pointers to set the all-time record as the Houston Rockets blow out the Utah Jazz. This mark stood until until 2018 actually, when Klay Thompson hit 14 in 2018 to set the all-time record. And finally, on this date, February 9th, 2006, Al Michaels officially joined the NBC Sunday Night Football broadcast, where he sat with John Madden for a couple of years, and Al Michaels is still there today. He's one of the best in the business, and this is this day in sports history. That's right, ladies and gentlemen. This day in sports history is sponsored by Homefields.com. Friday is Valentine's Day, and if your significant other is a sports fan, why not give them a Home Fields replica stadium? These replica stadiums have a layered design and range from 1.25 to 2 inches deep. Combined with the glow of beautiful LED lights, it creates an awesome 3D effect, yet they're still small enough to fit on a shelf, bookcase, or mantle. Choose any sports stadium, modern or old, and any sport. Baseball, football, pro and college, hockey, basketball, pro and college. You can get any stadium you want: Citi Field, Shea Stadium, Old Yankee Stadium from 1923, Ebbets Field, Soldier Field. You can get any from any old Madison Square Garden for the Rangers. You can get the Nassau Coliseum for the Rangers. Ralph Wilson Stadium in football. You can get Giant Stadium, and any stadium you can think of. These guys have it. Ken and Marcia have sold more than 60,000 of these since 1999, so give them a chance like so many other happy customers have. And if you want to be happy too, use my promo code Cramer. That's my last name, Cramer, and save 10% today. Go help Ken and Marcia out, and they'll help you. Homefields.com. That's HOMEFIELDS.com. Don't forget to use my promo code Cramer and save yourself 10%. Thank you, Homefields.com. All right, and thank you everybody for sticking around here on this Sunday night. It's not as cold as you think it is, but it's still pretty cold out for February here. As we all dream of an early spring. The groundhog saw his shadow, so that's a good thing. Maybe we're in for an early spring. As Met fans, though, we thought we were getting out of jail early. We thought we had a get out of jail free card when it comes to our owners. Most Met fans, if you talk to them, the one thing that drives every Met fan crazy is ownership. And we really thought that Steve Cohen was going to ride in with all that money and save us. I guess it's crazy because Met fans, as we know, we can't have nice things. Nice things only last so long for the Mets, we were fooled by Matt Harvey. We thought that he was the next Tom Seaver. He looked like it. He really did. And then we saw how that ended, and that didn't last too long. We saw the 2015 run to the World Series end with that smack of reality right to the face as Eric Hosmer made that great throw to home plate. And, so many others. Obviously, 2017 and 18. Coming off the back-to-back playoff appearances, it looked like the Mets really had a bright future, and that just didn't happen. But let me stop beating around the bush. We're talking about the Stevie Cohen sale and continuing to lament about how this did not go down. In case you haven't heard, Steve Cohen was supposed to buy the Mets for $2.6 billion. $2.6 billion. No, you did not hear me wrong. That's a B for billion. And but the crazy thing about the deal that really confused everyone, and as weird as it was, as Met fans, we were all willing to look the other way and just not question it, not say anything about it. But the weird thing about this deal was that he was going to be paying $2.6 billion, and apparently a lot of that up front. Enough to the point that he would have had 50% plus ownership for this coming up season. And, we were led to believe that it would increase every year to be 80% by the end of this 5-year window that they had been talking about. And the 5-year window would still have Jeff Wilpon and Fred Wilpon installed as the two faces of the club, specifically Fred, making all of the big-time decisions. Now, this doesn't make any sense to me. It didn't make any sense to anybody who heard it. I'm surprised it made sense to Steve Cohen, who still signed the agreement, the intent to buy the franchise. It still baffles me, to be honest. But, this had gone along far enough to the point that Steve Cohen, according to the New York Post, was ready to send out opening day weekend, which, by the way, is, 7 weeks away, something like that. He was getting ready to send out opening day weekend gala tickets. He was going to be having this big party, this soiree, pretty much announcing that he's the new majority owner of the Mets. And it's a good thing he didn't buy those invitations because they wouldn't have been sent out anyway, as this gala has been canceled, as has this deal. The deal fell through because supposedly the Wilpons made last-second changes that caused Cohen to back out. Now, this was the original story that came out. After that, Major League Baseball tried to soften the blow, and just like always, they protected the Wilpons. But don't let this fool you. The Wilpons were the people at fault. I don't know the ins and the outs of the deal. I don't know anything. But I'm telling you right now, let's do one thing. Let's look at history. History shows us that in 2002, the Wilpons bought the majority ownership of the Mets from the Doubleday family. They bought them out and acquired the controlling interest of the team. Now, these were two parties that owned this team since 1980, collectively. They'd been in business for 20 plus years together. And that deal at the end ended up going to court and being a nasty, nasty divorce between these two parties, as the Doubleday family accused the Wilpons of changing the deal at the last minute and negotiating in bad faith. Where have I heard that before? So let's move on. 2002, they got the team. Now we're in 2011. They're supposedly, which I still don't understand how after that Madoff scandal, that they weren't forced out of their team. Frank McCourt got forced to sell the Los Angeles Dodgers for $2 billion to Magic Johnson and his partners because of a nasty divorce. The Wilpons were involved with one of the biggest criminals in the history of Wall Street and the history of the game, and they had to pay $500 million in damages, and the team has never had the same type of A, success, or B, financial flexibility since then. They supposedly the team's finances are just in the toilet. That's being polite. And now they're going to sit here and tell me that, now it's supposed to not be the Wilpons' fault. But let's get back to the story. So 2011 we're at now. David Einhorn is about to buy controlling interests of the Mets from the Wilpons. And what happens? At the last second, the deal falls through. Einhorn was not happy about it. He came out and had several press conferences, which is very, I was just listening to a Wall Street, a financial reporter from the New York Post last week. He was making the rounds on WFAN. If I could recall his name, I'd give him credit, but I can't at the moment. But this guy even said at the time, that was very, very shocking because these brokers don't call press conferences like that. But this guy, David Einhorn, was so put off by the way the Wilpons changed the deal and the way they backed out and the bad faith they negotiated in that he had to tell people about it, and I don't blame him. It's the same thing. Why do you think they have Stevie Cohen all locked up in this NDA, this non-disclosure agreement? Because they don't want him tell the truth of what the Wilpons did. The Wilpons always like to do these gimmicks. They always like to change things at the last second. You know, they had one of the hang-ups in the deal was that Jeff Wilpon would retain his position and the perks that he's become accustomed to as an owner, and that his salary would increase. I believe it would start off his first year at $2.5 million. It's either 2 or 2.5, and it would be increasing incrementally every year until the fifth year, where it hit $4+ million. They're already milking this guy for $2.6 billion, making the Mets the highest paid for franchise in the history of baseball, which would also, obviously, because the Mets aren't as valued as highly as teams like the Dodgers and the Yankees, that if the Mets are bought for $2.6 billion, that immediately brings up the value of every other team in Major League Baseball. So Major League Baseball wanted this to get done. So and supposedly too, the Wilpons will still be selling this team. So just remember that, my fans, before you hang your heads in disgust at this story. But so supposedly that's what happened. That once again the Wilpons negotiated in bad faith. As I just pointed out, they did the same thing in 2002. They did the same thing in 2011, and then they did the same thing in 2019/20. So it seems about every 9 or 10 years the Wilpons decide to screw somebody over. And that's not even including their dealings with the Madoff family. So let's just leave it at that. But so if we look at all the snags and everything that went on with that deal, I don't blame Steve Cohen 1 second for not wanting this, because let's look at it. You're a guy, first off, that has $13 billion, and you're used to just being able to throw money at a problem. Just get this guy out of here. Let me do what I want. I don't care how much it costs. Just, so you're still paying $2.6 billion, top dollar, for this organization. Probably more than the Mets are worth. Definitely more than the Mets are worth, to be honest. Because even Stevie Cohen doesn't think they're going to be getting a $2.6 billion offer now, even when the Mets go up for auction, which apparently is how the team will be sold now too. And but so when you look at everything, I understand Major League Baseball side, where they have to make the Wilpons not the villain in this, because if they are, who's going to want to negotiate with them? Although if you're Steve Cohen too, you're paying $2.6 billion. Why do you want to pay all that money and not have a voice for the club that you own for 5 years? What, just so the Wilpons can sit there and pretend that they still own a baseball team? Just so they can sit there and should the Mets experience some modicum of success in the next couple of years, that the Wilpons can sit there and take credit for it, or be the faces of it, because they're the ones out there introducing players and getting their names in the headlines and everything, and get their faces in the pictures, because they're spending Stevie Cohen's money? Just get these guys out of here. Major League Baseball, Bud Selig and Rob Manfred should both be disgusted that they even allowed these guys to continue owning a baseball team, because that family, everything about them is a joke. And they just have to get out of Major League Baseball, specifically the Mets. Just stop owning my team, please. Just get away. I really hope, not that it's going to matter, because when you have a $2.6 billion potential chip that you want to move or whatever, or something that's worth that much, I'm guessing some of them want to hold on to it, specifically Jeff Wilpon. They say Jeff Wilpon really doesn't want to give up the Mets, but apparently Fred, Saul Katz, who's a part owner, and the Katz family in particular, from reports that I've read, really just want to get out. They don't like the direction that the team is going financially. It's just funny. This is all coming up now when this team is poised to have a good season. I don't think they've done enough this offseason to to combat the growth in their own division. The National League East, in my opinion, is the best division in baseball, bar none. If you look at what the Phillies have done over the last couple of years, if you look at what the Braves have done, back-to-back division championships, just a hell of a team. The Washington Nationals, the defending champions. Sure, they lost, one of the best players in the game in Anthony Rendon, but they're still a very, very talented and dangerous baseball team. They did one big thing too, was bring back Steven Strasburg. And you can say what you want about Steven Strasburg, but he paid them back over and over and over again in the playoffs every time he went out there and threw dominant baseball. So Steven Strasburg backed up what he said. As for everything else, I don't know. I think the Mets are in a spot right now where this would have been a much better discussion to have in 17 or 18 when the team was kind of on a downswing and you really didn't know where they were going to go. You kind of enter this season with, I don't know if they're hallucinations, but you enter this season that this team should be in the wild card hunt immediately. They could, and I say could because it could also be disastrous, but they could have one of the better bullpens in baseball if everything works out. If you go with the law of averages, can Jerry's Familia really be as bad as he was last year? I mean, I'm of the belief that the Familia is just not the pitcher he was a couple of years ago, but that also doesn't mean that he's an awful pitcher with a 6 ERA like he was this year. So you gotta hope that you get something more out of him this year, even if it's not 2015 Jerry's Familia. Dylan Betances. Betances is coming off a big injury. A really big injury, and it's not even the one that he had to rehab all of last season and got back to the major leagues in September. It's the one that after he came back, he got a big strikeout and danced off the mound and, injured himself badly. Now, you have an injury like that, you just have to hope that he rehabbed it properly. They're saying he's going to be ready for spring training. They're saying it shouldn't impact him this year. But when you've looked at guys that have had the same injuries in the past, it takes them a little bit to get back from. So you just got to hope that he keeps it up at least in the first half. He could be back to normal by the second half, but the first half is where you really have to keep an eye on him. And and also just go down the list. Diaz, is Edwin Diaz going to be the same Edwin Diaz they saw last year, or is Edwin Diaz going to really show up and have the all-star shutdown type of season that people expected last year? That frankly, if he did have that type of year last year, you could make the case the Mets would have been in the playoffs, and probably the Nationals would not have. And it kills me to say, and I hope it doesn't sound like sour grapes, because I also don't think that that's a guaranteed science either. A lot of people want to say, oh, well, he blew 14 games and the Mets missed the playoffs by 3, so obviously if he didn't blow those 14 games, the Mets make the playoffs. It's like, yeah, but, things don't always work out like that or like you think in baseball. So while I do think the Mets' chances would have improved to get in, yeah, no doubt about it, it's not a definite thing. So, let's just, you got to keep that perspective in mind too. But it's going to be a big season for the Mets as, if you really look at it, since the last game the Mets have played, they've had 3 managers and 2 owners. So, take that for what it is. For a minute too, I want to spend a minute talking about Luis Rojas. I'm a big fan of Luis Rojas. I think Luis Rojas is going to have a good year. I think he's going to be a good manager for this team. He's managed the team pretty much at every level in the minors. He's managed a lot of these guys coming up. I mean, Pete Alonso, Jeff McNeil, Rosario, Jacob deGrom, even Steven Matz. He's been a manager to half of the guys, if not more, on this roster. And I think that helps. That's a trust level that they have. And, as much as I think that they could have gotten through the whole Beltran thing, And as much as I didn't want them to fire Beltran at the time, I think the Mets made the best possible choice. Putting Luis Rojas in charge. He's a good baseball man. He's a man of character. He's a guy you can depend on. You've heard nothing but good things. Pete Alonso, McNeil, even Marcus Stroman, who only got a chance to work with Rojas last year for a couple of months after coming over from the Blue Jays. Marcus Stroman has been vocally supportive of him. And Marcus Stroman is one of the people that I would worry about, or I would have worried about, had Beltran not gotten fired. Because, specifically, when you go back to the whole Astros cheating scandal, right? One of the videos that have come out and have been heavily scrutinized was a video of Marcus Stroman, a Marcus Stroman Toronto Blue Jays start from, I believe it was July of 2017 at Minute Maid Park in Houston. And it's one of those games where you hear the banging of the drums, the banging of the garbage cans, whatever you want to call it. And if you're not familiar with it, that's how the Houston Astros would steal signs. They'd have a guy with a camera, or the guy with the camera would be relaying the signs, and you'd hear one bang for a fastball, two bangs for a breaking ball, so on and so forth. So when this video was examined, you really saw the Astros tear up this guy, and one of the biggest culprits that day, who had 3 hits and a couple of RBIs against him, was Carlos Beltran. And Marcus Stroman retweeted and commented on that video too. So now Marcus is a professional. I like him a lot too. So I don't think it would have affected him that much. But you never know. A lot of these guys have spoken very openly about how hostile they're going to be towards the Astros and the conspirators. This coming up season, a lot of people have threatened. Mike Clevenger from the Indians was saying he might be going after them in a couple of starts. There's a couple other people that have hinted that they might take retaliatory action against these guys. And why would you want that element in your clubhouse where there's a possibility of Beltran and Stroman butting heads all season? I know it's a starting pitcher, so it wouldn't have as much of an effect as it would be if it was an everyday player, but you still don't want that cloud of negativity in your clubhouse at all. So I will pat the Mets in the back. Well, at the offset of the season, my guy, the guy that I wanted more than anybody to manage the Mets, was Joe Girardi. I thought he was the perfect candidate. I think he's going to do a really good job in Philadelphia too, unfortunately for the Mets. But I wanted Girardi more than anything. Now, unfortunately, Van Wagenen and the Mets higher-ups, I don't want to say they wanted a puppet, but they wanted a puppet. They wanted somebody that they can control. They didn't want a Buck Showalter. They didn't want a Dusty Baker. They didn't want a Joe Girardi, who's guys that have their resumes and could just say to them, hey, leave me alone. I know how to win. I know how to manage. I don't want your input. They want a guy that knows the only reason you're sitting in this seat right now is because I want you to. So you're going to be listening to my quote-unquote suggestions aren't suggestions. Let's put it that way. So, it's one thing when you can look at the Mets situation and say, well, it's a slam dunk to hire Girardi. Well, Mets didn't want Girardi, and unfortunately, that's the route they take. But when you look at Luis Rojas, they couldn't have made a better choice for the situation. Luis Rojas, he's Felipe Alou's son. He's a very smart guy. He comes from a very smart family. I've always been a fan of the Alou family. Loved Moises Alou when he played in New York. Actually got to meet him in spring training one year. Couldn't have been nicer. I think I really think that the Mets might have found a good one, potential diamond in the rough here. And with the Mets, you don't see me. If you've listened to me over the last couple of years that I've been in this station, a lot of the times I'm not positive when it comes to the Mets. I try to be. I'm a diehard fan, but sometimes these Mets just, they give you lemons, and it's impossible to make lemonade. So, I will say that I'm happy with the direction this team is going on the field. Ownership is a different story, but like I said, happiness could be right around the corner for us Met fans as this team goes up for auction. Um, it could be a long process. I hope it's not going to be a 5-year process like it's been speculated and like it was going to be in the Stevie Cohen deal. I mean, one thing that I will say though is that if you look at the Nets when Prokhorov, their former owner, sold to their new owners, who are doing a great job by the way with that team. I'm not a Nets fan. I'm a Knicks fan. But you have to pat that team on the back for the way they've gone and the way they've rebranded themselves. But to get back to the point, that ownership transaction was laid out the same way that we heard the Mets, where it was, okay, it's going to be a 5-year thing, or it could be a little bit less than that, it could be a little bit more than that. And the next thing you know, that deal was done in about 9 months. The new owners just kept throwing more money at it, and it was done. Now that's what I was really hoping that was going to happen with Stevie Cohen. Okay, they say 5 years, but and I think that's what Steve Cohen was hoping too. But then it looked like the WIlpons were like, no, this isn't going to be a ceremonial position. We're actually going to be calling the shots and signing checks with your money. And I think that's what turned Stevie Cohen off, unfortunately. But we just got to see, what else happens, at the auction now. Anything can happen. They could go to anybody. They could go to owners that are worse than the WIlpons. I mean, I hope Major League Baseball would never let that happen, but it's a possibility. So that's the scary thing about going to an auction. You go from Met fans being so thrilled that Steve Cohen, a $13 billion hedge fund guy, is going to come in and own your team. You just get these fantasies about having the richest owner in baseball, which is what he would have been, and he would have paid the richest price for a baseball team of all time. Now you just got to hope that the person or people who buy the controlling interest of the Mets are and is a person that cares as deeply for this franchise and this team as diehard Met fans do. And you just got to hope that that things work out. You just got to keep your fingers crossed, say a couple of prayers, hope it all comes down right, because the good thing is, the thing that we can all be happy about, is that the sale is looking like it's happening. It's going to this auction fund, which, funny enough, Bradley Wilpon, Jeff Wilpon's son, is a guy who works with that team. So always funny to see that. So but as we come down here for the final stretch here on Sports Talk 1240, I want to thank everybody for tuning in here. It's been a lot of fun talking sports that you hear on this Sunday night. Thanks for tuning in and staying up late with me. You can catch me next time around. I'll be on in March again. And catch my podcast, Coffee with Cramer, on Apple iTunes and Spotify. And follow me on Twitter, Cramer New York. And I'll catch you guys next time. Have a great week.
The views expressed in the previous program do not necessarily represent those of the staff, management, or owners of WGBB.
This is WGBB.